So how do I manage my boss? At the end of World War II, much of Europe was left with unimaginable damage to churches, schools, homes, and fields. Equally damaged were the many marriages, families, and children caught in the middle of this madness. In the spring of 1946, a young entrepreneurial Christian man who knew the wreckage of war responded to God's clear calling to start a ministry to those who suffered under this horrific conflict. He formed an impressive board, raised resources, and implored others to join him in caring for these forgotten casualties. After 50 years of ministry, it was clear that he had followed God's call. Countless marriages were repaired and returned to health. Families were restored, and children knew that their Heavenly Father loved them as one of His own. In 1996, the founder felt it was time to retire. The board accepted this resignation reluctantly, but with heartfelt joy, and began a search for a new executive director to lead the ministry. The board chose a man who was outgoing, good at raising resources, and a skilled staff manager. When he retired in 2013, the board did a 2-year search and hired a new executive director in 2015, who was given the mandate to grow the ministry. The new director seems to be a good man with a good marriage and has good relationships with his 3 children. His past ministry experience was in a related field, and he had a proven record of resource development. However, within the first months of the new director, the staff was struggling with his leadership style. For example, there used to be weekly staff meetings. Now there is one per month. Organizational goals seemed to change from week to week. The staff was unclear about what success looks like. Tasks are assigned to staff without consideration of gifting or insight. The new director is rarely in his office, and when he is, his door is always shut. And finally, the staff misses the old director, who was always available, very approachable, and fun to be around. So the case study today is one to have you dig into some of the nuances and some of the struggles of managing the person who you report to. And what I have at the bottom of this case study are 4 questions which I'd like you to discuss in your small groups. The questions are designed to create conversation, but there may be other questions that come up that you want to discuss in your small group. We'll do this for about 30 minutes. At the end of the 30 minutes, what I'd like is for each group, each small group, to come up with 2 questions for our panel it'll be myself, John, and Luder. And we'd like to then answer those questions for you. Things that may not be covered in this case study that have maybe you've experienced, or questions that you think you may experience, or questions that you may anticipate experiencing. Or just some general questions on how it is that you as a leader manage those who you report to. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce our other guests here on our panel. This is John Stevens from the UK, and Luder Whitlock, jet lag, I got jet lag. You live in?
I live in Orlando, Florida.
Orlando, Florida. There you go.
I live in Disney World.
Disney World. Well, we're glad you're here. So what we'll do now is I will read the questions and have our panel respond as they seem appropriate, and hopefully we'll get to most of the questions that you asked. I was just kind of glancing at some of these are similar, so if your question doesn't get asked, it's because it was close enough to a question that I had already read. So with that, I'll go with this question first. How do we communicate new ideas in a way a new boss will understand what is being asked? How do we communicate new ideas in a way to a new boss that will make sure that we're being heard well?
Given the circumstances here, it seems to me one of the questions that might be raised with the new chief executive is, do you like to have new ideas brought to you? And if you do, is there a particular way in which you would like to hear suggestions for new things to do, or is there a particular time you would like to hear that? We may come up with some things, but we don't want to make any suggestions in ways that might not be helpful to you. So how would you like for us to do this?
I just think in this situation, it seems as though this new chief executive is very new to the role. He's only been in post for a small number of months. He seems to be leading in a poor way. He's not done the things that somebody in this role should do when they come into post. I actually did exactly this. I became the CEO of an organization in this situation, which had been in existence for about 90 years. There were some very well-respected members of staff there that people loved. I made some of these mistakes and experienced how people helped me. You probably don't want, as soon as you've just started in a role, somebody to come and land all their new ideas on you, because you're trying to find your feet and discover how the organization works. You need to understand the people. So I would be cautious about wanting to bring too many new ideas too quickly, and want to allow the person to find their feet, to build relationships. They may not have done it well here, but they are going to have to connect with the staff. And at some point, they're going to realize the need to do that. So I think one of the challenges is, how proactive are you in bringing your new ideas? How much do you wait patiently for an opportunity to build the relationship and share those ideas? It may partly depend what sort of appraisal process is there for staff. How do staff get managed? Is there a formal context for sharing ideas and bringing those forwards? But I'd be cautious about rushing in with too many new ideas and telling the CEO what he needs to do. Give him space to find his feet and build the relationship so that you can then begin to share those ideas.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly. You have to find out how he wants to handle that. Seems to me there are a couple of things here you could say. The first is, if you think about staff doing things in general, how are they going to do that and approach this new executive? The only way he's really giving them an opportunity to do it, since his door is closed, is at a staff meeting. And so they have to be very careful about what they do and how they do it. If they don't do that, it's going to be threatening or disturbing to him, and it will further complicate the relationships they have. So maybe one of the things that could be most helpful might be for an appropriate person or two who could possibly develop a relationship with this new executive. Say, who could really get to know him and he might be willing to establish a relationship with. He's got to reach out to somebody and begin to have somebody to talk to, and somebody that he can trust, or else he'll never get anywhere. So the question is, who might be most likely? How could that be done? And how could those people have the appropriate kind of approach to him in making any suggestions? And I think they would have to do that very carefully.
So both of you are talking about the idea that as a staff person, how is it that you sort of manage up, how is it you begin to understand that person, that executive that you report to? What are some of the communication styles that person would need to be communicated through?
Yeah.
Essentially.
And if you don't ask them at some point, how would you like for us to report to you? How would you like for us to bring ideas to you? How do you want us to operate? If he doesn't do that, you've got to surface that. And for the average person on the staff, the only place is at that meeting, and say, just tell us how you would like for us to do this. And
which again to me is a great illustration of this idea of managing up. You know, oftentimes when you get hired by someone, they tell you what to do. Here's your job function, here's your job title, here's your office, here's your desk, here's your chair, here's your pencil and paper, here's your computer, now go at it, and you're used to taking instruction. And I think what the case study illustrates well, and both John and Luder referred to this, is the idea of how do I understand how this person who I report to wants to be managed? How should they be communicated with?
It's possible that there would be a person or two on the staff that could even reach out to this executive and say, would it be possible for us to go lunch together or have some coffee and talk? And in the course of all that, just ask the executive, how do you feel things are going? Is there any way we can be helpful to you, and things like that? I think you've got to find some ways to build some trust and to make it easier for them.
I think that's right. I think it's important to remember that it's probably pretty disorientating for this person to have come in and to recognize the big challenge that they face. They were probably in a ministry that they enjoyed and in which they'd been successful. They may well have relocated their family to a place, and it might be often it's harder for the family that follows the CEO than for the CEO themselves. They no doubt understand and recognize that the staff loved the previous CEO, and they don't have that relationship with them. They're probably sitting there thinking, these staff really wish I wasn't here. So understanding the challenge of coming in and leading is really, really helpful. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do because you don't have those relationships, particularly if there was somebody really loved and respected beforehand, and you feel the pressure to deliver quite quickly. So I think having an understanding of the challenge they're facing helps you to be able to serve them. And I think it is making these points of contact. They're in the office occasionally and the door is shut. You have to find ways in which you can knock on it, but not with an agenda. Maybe you plan to take them a coffee and a donut. And you don't want a meeting with them, you just want to say, it's really nice to see you in the office. Just thought you might like something. It's not an agenda. It's just showing you're friendly and you can have some kind of interaction. So you can take very little steps that make their life easier and make them feel more welcomed. And that helps to build up the possibility of a relationship where you can then talk more about the way the ministry is going.
Yeah, I think, even a word of appreciation or encouragement, anything you can do that will establish rapport and open up communication and relational channels, it will be a step forward.
I think of Ananias when Saul was converted. He comes to him and he sort of prays with him and welcomes him as brother Saul, even though he was the great enemy. There's that point of wanting to reach out to others and embrace them. And I think you can do that and find ways of trying to do that.
Find places to communicate. Here's a question that I find interesting. The new leader wants to try a program that the staff tried 5 years ago and it failed. He insists on doing it. How does the staff manage their boss in a case like this? So something in the past has been tried, didn't work. The new person comes in, wants to try the same program. Your experience suggests that it will not work. How do you manage your boss in a case like that?
Well, it's a complicated dynamic here. And the question is, who can help this executive avoid failure? That's the real question you have from the staff perspective. And if he insists on doing this and it fails, he's only going to hurt his relationship and his possibility of success. So who could possibly talk to him, and not in front of everybody else, but privately, and ask him, are you aware that we did something like this 5 years ago? And not tell him the result, just I would say, are you aware that we did this very thing 5 years ago? And he would either say yes or no. He'd probably say, no, I didn't have any idea you did this. And then you would say, well, we did, and if you're interested in knowing how it worked out, we'll be happy to provide that information for you. Now, he might go ahead and ask for it first, then you could provide him the information. He could gather all that, look at it, and decide if what he wants to do is different enough to try it, or if you've just helped him avoid a big mistake and now you're a new friend he can rely on in the future. And typically, if you're coming into that role and you're behaving the way this fella is apparently behaving, he's attempting to look as if he knows what he's doing, but he's failing to do the very things that will help him succeed, and that is build relationships and open communication with his staff. So somebody's got to help him overcome that and begin to get things moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very complicated scenario. There are two dangers, aren't there? You've got the new CEO who's coming in with his big idea and is determined to pursue it. There's the danger that the staff might be cynical and say, we did it in the past, so it won't work now. You might want to start by saying, well, it might work this time. It's possible. The organisation's changed, it's different leaders. What you as the staff have got to do is you've got to know very clearly why it didn't work. Why didn't it work? It's not enough. People often will say this idea didn't work, but they haven't analysed down to why it didn't work. So they then assume it won't work the next time, but if they don't know what the problem was, then they won't be able to judge whether it will work this time. So it's not enough simply to say, we did it before and it didn't work. You've got to be clear about why it didn't work. And then it may well be that the way it's being implemented this time may work more effectively. It's also important to understand why the CEO or the person wants to pursue that strategy. What is it they're trying to achieve? Why do they think this strategy will achieve it? You might be able to help them to implement the same idea but in a better way if you can understand why they want to do it. And I agree, so one would hope the organisation has got some kind of report that it did the previous time that analysed why it didn't work, that can be passed on and that can be learnt from. So there's a dialogue to be had there. But I think in many organisations they get held back when the current staff have adopted an approach of there's this whole category of things that will never work and therefore we don't want to try them. And it does happen. Sometimes you do have to revisit ideas, but do them in a better way.
Yeah, I agree. Part of this too is what kind of staff do you have? Do they want to help him succeed, or do they want to let him fail? And if they really want to help him succeed, then they'll be looking for various ways to provide him the kind of information and support he needs to begin to move forward in a constructive way. And there's some staffs that'll let you fall flat on your face and then they'll walk across you after you do it.
Do you think there's a time, in an organization's life where you're trying to communicate with your boss and things just aren't quite connecting and you are feeling compelled to leave? Is there a point at which that happens? Could you describe what that point would be, if it should be, or should the organization change because you as a staff person believe it should?
I think there's a point at which your working relationship has broken down and it's no longer healthy for you, the organisation, or the CEO. I think it's important that the primary responsibility for managing the CEO must be with the board and those to whom he's accountable. Many of these problems arise because the board fails to do their job properly. They should be aware of how he's managing the staff, how he's running the organisation. And as a member of staff, you can't do the board's job for them. They have to do that. And there's a point at which, because you're more junior, you cannot change the organisation. You cannot change the individual. And if the processes are not there for those issues to be addressed, the probability is that you're not going to make any headway. And the point at which you've reached a level of anger and resentment against your boss is a point at which it's probably healthier for everybody for you to go and pursue your ministry elsewhere. So I think there is a point at which the relationship becomes unhealthy and it doesn't achieve the goals of the organisation or of your own ministry goals.
Do you think there's ever a point where it's appropriate for you as a staff person to go around your boss and go to the board? Is it ever appropriate to jump up one level and express your frustration?
In a good situation, I would want the board to be asking staff those questions and have channels for that to happen, because if they're going to manage the CEO effectively, they need to know what his senior staff think of him. So I think a good organisation will build in structures where you don't have to go behind the boss, but there is a consultation process with staff so that the board are well informed about the health of the organisation. Depends on the board. Sometimes the board is so in favour of the CEO and they're basically backing him that even going to the board is not going to make any difference. You just have to have wisdom to recognise that that's the situation. But, yeah.
Well, again, it's very complex. And one of the questions I would be asking myself is this: how long has this team worked together? Is this a group that is really a wonderful team, very reliable? You know they always are going to try to do the right thing. If you know that, I think if there were a tactful way for some communication to get to the board that they could be helpful in this situation, it might be worth it, because otherwise you're on a path of self-destruction for the CEO, or he's going to eliminate a lot of staff. And sometimes that's what happens with a new executive. He comes in, he can't work with the team, he doesn't communicate, doesn't build relationships, and many of the best ones don't like it and they will leave and go somewhere else. Some of the others he won't be happy with, and so he'll start rebuilding. And then the question is, what kind of organization will he rebuild? And that's why a board, I think John has appropriately said, ought to be concerned about how this transition moves. The other side of it is, if you have people on a staff who go to the board and they find encouragement to do that on a regular basis, you undercut your executive and you open the door for mischief that is unhealthy for the organization. And the board has got to be very careful about that.
Yeah. So then, what happens in a situation where the staff has a problem with the CEO? To what level is it appropriate to discuss those issues in the staff, or should you take it to the CEO without? How does it get away from gossip and stay focused on what the issues are in an organization? What's your experience been?
Well, mine is that this is a really tough situation. And I think there are always leaders on your staff. And the leaders on your staff can keep people together so that you don't have mutiny, and so that you don't have a lot of backbiting, so that you don't develop an unhappy institutional culture. And you expect staff leaders to be able to manage that part. For them to do that over any sustained period, they're going to have to offer some hope. And that hope has to come in terms of a plan to do something to bring change. Either approaching the CEO or approaching the board or a combination or something.
I think it's just worth saying, I think in this scenario it's very early days of this person's leadership. If they are 5 years into the role and you've still got these problems, I think that's a very much more serious scenario as to how that's to be addressed. And there is, I think, the two things here. I think when you're a member of staff, it's very easy to think that you can do a better job than the CEO because you don't experience the particular pressures of being in that situation. It's always worth bearing that in mind, that there are pressures in that situation. So that's kind of one thing. And I think key leaders need to learn to lead themselves. You do require the ability to be able to connect with others, listen to others, build those structures. Nobody can do that for you. You have to choose to do it for yourself. Others might help you to do it, but it's a mentality that you've got to want to have those kinds of relationships and structures in place. And if a CEO doesn't want those structures in place, then it's very difficult to get them to do it.
You know, I cannot imagine this pattern continuing for 5 years, I would say. I think if this is the pattern, it won't last a year. Something will have to change. One of the things that we haven't mentioned that could be considered here is this. You have a new executive. He's trying to think of all these things he has to do. He's concentrating on that. The last thing he wants is failure. As the staff responds to him, they want the organization to succeed also. So a question which is appropriate for them is, are there ways in which we can give cues without having to do more than that? We can smile and warm up to certain things. We can be non-committal or go the other way on certain other things. And typically another person is going to read those cues if they're there over a period of time, and you'll see how they begin to respond to that, and then you know what they're really made of.
Just one of the, I think here again we're told that this individual had a previous ministry experience and has a proven record. Mm-hmm. You could find out a lot about what they did beforehand. So as a member of staff, you may not know them personally, but you can find out a lot about their ministry, how they worked, what they did, what they accomplished. That might help you to have wise judgment in the way that you help them. It might enable you to trust some of their decisions. It might make you aware of some of their weaknesses, but this is not somebody who's never led before. There are things that can be learnt from their past experience that might help you to manage them well.
I guess one of my questions here was this very carefully worded to mention only resource development? And if so, then it's acknowledging some deficiencies in other areas.
Yeah, it was. You know, it's been my experience, you know, that executive directors, CEOs, oftentimes feel like islands. You know, they don't know where they belong. They report to the board of directors, and they're responsible for making sure that things get done, that, you know, things are executed well. They have certain pressures, and particularly to Luder's question, you know, most executive directors have a lot of resource pressure on them. They're expected to raise the resources necessary to make this ministry move forward. And then you have the staff who are more program driven. You know, they want to feed the hungry and clothe the naked, and take care of the issues that this organization has been charged with doing. And so the CEO or the executive director stands in the middle. And the thing that this person wants more than anything else is trust relationships. He wants to be able to trust his staff, to tell him the truth, and he wants to trust the board of directors that they'll support him in the tough decisions that he has to make, or she has to make. And that's really, if you keep that in mind in terms of your relationship with those that you're responsible to, that they feel oftentimes isolated because of the nature of their job, and that what they're really looking for is someone who they can trust, someone who is reliable, who will be diligent in the work that they're assigned, but ultimately that are trustworthy. It tends to make the relationships go well.